I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate. We think too much and feel too little. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness. Without these qualities, life will be violent. No one will be lost. No one will be lost. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die. Dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Will return to the people. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. Now let us fight to free the world, to fulfill that promise. Let us all unite.
All right, folks, welcome. Welcome to the Corporation Nation radio program. I'm your host, Clint Richardson. And today, what is today? Today is Monday, November 4th, 2013. My special guest today is Bob Burton. Bob's coming to us from Florida. Now, what would you do? You out there who's listening, what would you do, excuse me, if you witnessed something? If you witnessed something so terrible and so against your sensibilities that you felt you needed to report it to somebody, but then you found out that it was actually the very reporting agency that was doing the dirty deed. Now, what the heck do you do when your government is so corrupt that it openly commits crimes against its very own laws? Well, that's the question that I think Mr. Burton had, Robert Bob Burton had in 2011 when he witnessed some employees and non-employees dumping some very bad stuff into what was it again? It was it was one of the parks down there. I'm going to have to ask Bob about that. And what did he do? Well, he tried to take matters into his own hands. He tried to start calling about it. And, of course, what happened? Well, it's what happens to everyone that tries to fight back against the corrupt government. They took his property, broke into his house, and stole all the evidence. Hey, Bob, Mr. Burton, are you there? Bob, do I have you on the line? Well, I'm not hearing Bob. Maybe we can get him connected. Florida Department of Law Enforcement, dressed in all their tactical gear, armed with assault rifles and even a search warrant. As we know, most search warrants are bogus. They seized his computer, his cell phone, his video camera. And the problem was that he was calling and actually recording what his politicians were saying over the phone. Oh, dear goodness, that's a crime. That's a crime in and of itself. To actually use what's said from a public official in public, oh my gosh, folks, we can't do that. We can't have transparency like that. My goodness. So Bob was unfortunately yet another victim. And he he's trying to call in, and we don't seem to have him yet still. Bob's actually a logger. He's what's called a deadhead logger in the Florida Panhandle, and he actually witnessed the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, of all agencies, and some of the state employees there dumping toxic waste in a Florida water reclamation area. Isn't that nice? This is the arrogance and ignorance of government, of course, and this is one of the big problems with having government being the caretaker of so much land out there, including all of this. Well, a lot of these water reclamation areas, unfortunately, are within the department, the Bureau of Land Management, and of course, that land is being managed quite poorly, including what can only be called the genocide of wild horses, because of course you can't start doing things to public lands when you have such beautiful wild creatures on those lands. And so, of course, they've been injecting those horses, and in other words, vaccinating them, giving them porcine zona pellucida, as I covered in my vaccine movie, to literally vaccinate them against reproduction. A very interesting subject that we'll cover some other time. So the Department of Law Enforcement, Department of Environmental Protection, seized his entire season harvest, all the logs, $300,000 worth, for absolutely no reason, despite the proper permits, despite violating no laws. And to this day, I believe, Bob has still not received any actual crime or any charge of crime. So it looks like we finally got him back on the line. Hey, Bob, are you there, sir? Well, I think we're still having some technical issues. You know, this is ironic. I've interviewed Bob 2 or 3 times, and it seems like each time there's some kind of issue. I know one time his phone box on the outside of his house just got demolished for no apparent reason at all, and we couldn't do the interview at all. This time, I'm not sure what's going on. Bob, do we have you? Well, all right. Well, that just ruins everything, doesn't it? Well, I guess we'll try and let me just read you the timeline. Bob, do we have you there? Let me just read you the timeline of what actually happened. Now, this was in January of 2011. They had a search warrant, and the complainant on the search warrant was, of course, not a person, but an actual special agent of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Of course. No one actually made a complaint. It was actually the law enforcement agency themselves in a cover-up. A gentleman named Keith Kameg of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement confirmed that it was a Florida Department of Law Enforcement-led investigation. So, of course, the complainant is also the department that is doing the investigation. That, of course, is illegal in and of itself. But was unable to give any more information because, of course, the warrant was a current warrant and the home was part of an ongoing investigation. Let's see. They seized, in an official investigation, he had collected information and phone calls and other types of evidence of the illegal dumping of hazardous materials into sinkholes at Suwannee River State Park. Of course, all state employees were ultimately exonerated by the Department of Environmental Protection Inspector General, and a criminal investigation was launched against non-state employees for the dumping, because, of course, the lovely, wonderful, beautiful Environmental Protection Agency would never, ever do anything like this, would they? No. Well, Bob, if you're on, go ahead and interrupt me anytime. Looks like we're still having some technical difficulties. I guess we're going to have to start calling this show the Victims Anonymous or Victims Unanonymous. I don't know. Seems like everybody out there is becoming a victim of something or the other. It's pretty pathetic, really. So the other day I mentioned a little company called Unicor. I don't know if you guys caught that at the end of the show on Friday, but Unicor is part of the prison industry, where they put people in jail and make them work. We'll talk about that when we get back, since Bob is not joining us, it looks like. Stay with us.
First of all, let me take just a moment to thank you for allowing me back into your homes. If this is your first time with us, let me extend a personal invitation. Let's build a happy little cloud. Let's build some happy little trees. There are no limits here. You start out by believing here. This is your world. You're the creator. Find freedom on this canvas. Believe that you can do it. Cause you can do it. Relax, let it flow. Think like water. Relax, let it flow. You can go on and on and on. We don't make mistakes. We just have happy accidents. You can do anything that you want to do. Total power. Sing along, have a good time.
All right, folks, welcome back. I really certainly apologize for the technical difficulties, so I will go ahead and just talk. I want to talk to you about the private prison industry. One of my biggest pet peeves, one of the worst criminal activities of our government that I can possibly think of, not to mention the privatization aspect. Now, we read Executive Order 10803, I believe it was the privatization, infrastructure privatization executive order, which we were speaking of it in terms of Common Core and privatizing schools, but homes and prisons were also on that list of things that could be privatized, and thus we have, after Reagan and the Iron Lady did so much to promote privatization both in the European Union, United Kingdom, I should say, and in the United States. You had Bush then Bush Sr. signed that executive order, and since then we have had massive privatization of all infrastructure and assets, from parking garages to parking meters to schools to prisons and everything else in between. Anything that your taxpayer dollars paid for to build can and will be privatized at some point. They will in turn what's called public-private partnerships, and that's exactly what the private prison industry is. And let me give you an example of how this works. Now, there was a recent letter from Corrections Corporation of America, which is actually, I believe, at this point, either the first or second largest private prison industry corporation out there, a private corporation. Letter, it's a very frightening thing to comprehend when you understand what this letter is actually saying. And it said basically that it was a letter sent to all 48 U.S. governors. In other words, the not Hawaii and not Alaska, I don't believe. And it was announcing, it was sent to all the governors, the National Governors Association, announcing what they're calling the investment initiative. Quote unquote, the investment initiative is a new plan to spend up to $250 million to purchase prisons from individual state, local, and federal government entities on the conditions, and this is very important to comprehend, on the conditions of a minimum commitment of 20-year government contracts for each facility, with a requirement to fill each new private prison to at least a 90% capacity for that 20-year contract. So, just so we're clear here, this is a private corporation coming out of Agenda 21, something called the Investment Initiative, that wants governors to enter into a public-private partnership with a corporation that it sells its prisons to. And so that you didn't miss this, a commitment to fill those prisons, to fill those beds with innocent victims of a criminal system that's gone private, victimless criminals, in other words. So we need to keep these prisons filled to 90% of its capacity in order to fulfill the public-private partnership contract with companies like Corrections Corporation of America. Okay, you see, or you should see how devious and horrific that is. So, I just can't imagine a governor saying, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, let's send out a memo to our local police chiefs, and let's make sure that we have a lot of let's crack down on pot, for instance. We'll put people who smoke pot, even though it's not a drug, according to our own legal definitions. It's just a plant. Can't really regulate a plant, but we'll call it a drug, and we'll throw people in jail for it, and we'll make them work in Corrections Corporation of America private prisons." All right? And we'll make sure that we fill those prisons up to 90%. Now, if we don't fill those prisons up to 90%, the part of that contract says, well, hey, we'll make it up with taxpayer dollars. So if we only fill that prison up to, say, 75%, we're going to have to make up through taxpayer money, taxpayer contributions, if you will, so that 15% of empty beds so that the corporation can be insured to make its profit. Meanwhile, guess who the main investor is of those corporations, like Corrections Corporation of America? You betcha. Government pension funds. You see that? You see how that works? You see that government is gaining profit and at the same time agreeing to promote absolute tyranny and destitute? You see how that works? That's how every industry works. That's why Monsanto has such a grasp. Guess who? Go look at who's invested in Monsanto. Go look at who's invested in the vaccine corporations, and you'll understand why government wishes to see vaccines spread like disease over the land. They stand to make profit. That's how government works, folks. Now, I've heard a rumor that we attempted to get Bob back again. Mr. Bob Burton, are you there, sir? Bob, are you a mute? What's going on here?
You can't hear me, I must be.
Oh, wait, I think we got you now, sir.
Did you get me?
Oh, my goodness. Bob Burton, welcome to the show, my friend.
Glad to be here. And I was in and out. I could hear you half the time, but boy, what a good job winging it.
I know.
Your guy doesn't answer.
I'll be here all week. So Bob, let's talk about this. I mean, this is obviously how it all started. You were a witness to something that obviously shouldn't have been happening. You saw this toxic waste dump happening while you were out doing your specific duties as a logger. And let's go from there. Why don't you tell us what's happened since?
Well, I had come out of the timber industry, so I was well aware with the way the state systems were being used for monopolizing the industry I came from. And when I had kind of backed off from a company I had called Burton International, where I designed and built machinery systems for lumber handling in the timber industry, I backed off into just try to retreat into a smaller and smaller livelihood where I could sustain some kind of lifestyle. And at that point, I saw the same organizations, state agencies, who had been harassing me as a manufacturer and designer of machinery systems. I saw them dumping toxic waste and things that nobody I knew in the timber industry would have ever dreamed of into water reclamation areas, sinkholes, that type thing. That in this instance, the ones we photoed were feeding an area called Lime Springs, which is in the middle of the, according to the state, most pristine, most valuable, has to be protected watershed in the world. Well, they had, when we reported this stuff to the state warning point, they immediately returned fire and came after us as the reporters when they found out it was DEC employees dumping the waste.
All right, but my friend, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in 3 or 4 minutes here. Stay with us, folks.
Okay, very good.
He's a rebel and a runner. He's a signal turning green. He's a restless young romantic, wants to run the big machine. He's got a problem in his
Here in the Corporation Nation, I'm your host, Clint Richardson. With me today is Bob Burton. Mr. Burton, you saw a crime not only against humanity, not only against nature, but against the very laws that regulated that crime by the very agency that creates that law. So what happened next?
My wife and I we got the brochure that Florida Department of Environmental Protection put out called, and it was referred to as a state warning point. So we called the state warning point. We told them we had photographs. We knew where these dump sites were.
So this is like a call-in, like a tattletale call-in. If you see something wrong, call this number kind of thing?
Exactly, hotline. Okay. It says on the brochure, it says, recognize it, record it, report it. So we recognized it. We photographed it. We gave them maps. We developed maps on how to get to the locations. We did everything we could do what the brochure said.
And then they're like, we didn't really mean it.
Well, then they sent 8 or 10 guys to the park where we had reported this and started cleaning everything up. And they started we tried to report anonymously. We didn't want anything to do with it. So they started investigating to find out who we were. And ultimately, they narrowed it down to it was us. So we at that time, we have a place on the Swanee River, but it was flooded. The water was high, so we were staying in the state park. So they raided our campsite and ejected us from the state park and gave us lifetime no trespass warnings. To this day, we are not allowed to go in Florida State Park property. And the reason being, what they state, is that we threatened law enforcement officers. But they did everything. They cleaned up the area. They removed everything they had done. And then they falsified the reports and documents, left us without due process, being punished for the rest of our lives not to be able to set foot on state property. So we asked for an administrative hearing, again, according to their rules. And we went through the entire process, very costly, very time-consuming. And at the end of the day, Department of Environmental Protection waived our right. They didn't waive their right to an administrative hearing. They waived our right to an administrative hearing. So we went back and started to try to find out what other remedy we had. And we found out that what we needed to do next was called mediation. So we got a hold of, at that time, Charlie Crist, who was the Attorney General of the state of Florida. And we went to his woman, and there was a woman who handled the mediation. We go through this very time-consuming, very costly process. And at the end of the day, Department of Environmental Protection waived our right to mediation, yet maintained these lifetime no trespass warnings where we're unable to set foot on state property. So we started going to the senator's office and state representative's office and the governor's office. And every single time they would tell us, oh, this is, terrible. These people can't be allowed to get away with this. We're going to get into it. So we finally wind up with Senator Charlie Dean, who is the chair of the Environmental Committee for the state of Florida and vice chair of Law Enforcement and Courts Committee.
Dean is a state senator or a national senator?
He's a state senator.
Okay.
And he refers us to his chief of staff, who is Ryan Tyson, and says, of course, we're volunteering on another guy's campaign who's a good guy, and he didn't get elected, so I don't want to really mention his name tied into this. But because we were campaigning and everything, Senator Dean is telling us that won't happen. We'll take care of this. They can't do this. I'm your man. And he turns us over to Ryan Tyson. Well, Ryan Tyson is telling us the same song and dance, saying, they can't do this. We're going to stop this. We're going to do the right thing. We're conservative Republicans. We believe in limited government. they can't do this to you. So these promises went on for year after year after year. Finally, in 2011, actually in 2010, we were starting to try to find out what's going on behind the scenes. How come these guys are telling us one thing and they're doing something else? So with my background with Burton International, I kind of knew the way things worked. So I started to investigate who's paying for these guys' campaigns, whose, legislation are they catering to, who are their actual clients. And I started to find out that they were foreign corporations and multinational corporations. And this goes back into your CAFR and your CAFR funds and where they're investing our tax dollars.
The investment funds, sure.
Investment funds. So what I was running up on was Nestle, Klausner, AMEC, Atkins Global, and several of these other big companies that we've all heard of. And it goes right into Monsanto, who's poisoning our food, the whole same bunch. So I ran up on these organizations called Associated Industries of Florida and National Association of Manufacturers.
And those are all private, non-governmental associations, correct?
Non-governmental, yes. And I started to see that Ryan Tyson, the guy that Senator Charlie Dean had put me in touch with to work with on this, was actually a lobbyist for the clients of these self-proclaimed secret organizations.
So let me see if I got this straight now. State Senator Charles S. Charlie Dean Sr. is the chairman of the Florida Senate Committee on Environmental Preservation and Conservation, and his chief of staff, his underling, his right-hand man, is a lobbyist for the worst environmental polluters on Earth?
Absolutely.
Okay, just making sure I understood this. Go ahead.
Well, and at the time now, it was before he went through the revolving door. Of course, I was calling him out for preparing to go through the revolving door and representing these guys while we're lobbying for these multinational corporations while on the payroll as a chief legislative aide for a state senator. Well, then he accused me of being threatening. And so one thing led to another. And, of course, if you're threatening a state employee, you're in trouble. So they sent 15 guys to our house with Power Ranger costumes and M16s and helmets.
Well, did you threaten them in any way?
Well, what it turns out in these sworn depositions, which I now have audio and transcripts of, the only threat they could come up with is that I threatened to run for state senate against Charlie Dean.
How dare you?
I've got that in. I mean, nobody taught this Ryan Tyson fellow how to say, I don't recall. Standard protocol for those kind of crooks is usually never admit, never deny, and make counter-accusations. This guy just spilled the beans in the depositions, so now we're holding them.
Jeez.
And that was my threat. My threat was run for state senate.
Right. They haven't confiscated that at all, right?
They confiscated all of it.
They did. Okay, so this was still before they raided.
The transcripts were from the depositions of the criminal case against me.
Oh, okay.
They dropped. When they dropped it, I went to go get the public record. And when I did, I got the entire file. I got the audio and the transcripts of the depositions that, for one, Ryan Tyson. And this is Tyson, like Tyson chicken. So you have Tyson's, Purdue's, all these people involved with Associated Industries. Pamela Purdue is Associated Industries of Florida's general counsel. It was just a tight-knit little bunch of people.
So are you saying that this fella is a relation of the Tyson family?
We believe he is. We haven't been able to prove it, and I don't think they want to claim him about right now.
No, I don't suppose so. Well, now I see that there's a website that was updating your trial here. He said repeated calls have not been returned to Senator Dean. That was back in January of 2011. And then they advised you on the 21st of February that your computer, cell phone, and video camera were missing from the evidence locker. And they said that they can't produce a chain of evidence documenting it. And then on the 27th of February, they said they found your equipment. You know what? Dude, this is like some of the most delicious. I'm getting hungry. This irony is so delicious. We'll be back, folks. Stay with us. There's way more to this story going on here. Stay with us, Bert.
You want some more? Scientists have been battling to understand what this unappealing object is all about.
I've been looking into government conspiracies for quite some time now. And I gotta be honest, this is a new one for me. I've watched government purposefully lose money in the U.S. stock markets only to regain that money in one of its dummy temporary corporations in Singapore or Thailand or somewhere else. I mean, I'll see them short bet and long bet things and do the absolute opposite elsewhere. I'll see all these different scams for them to rake in money and basically, harbor it offshore. But this takes the cake because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Burton. Again, my guest is Bob Burton from Florida here. You're saying that the state senator in charge of the environmental protection, basically agency of Florida, not the federal one, but the state one, is basically a lobbyist. His chief of staff is definitely a lobbyist for some of the worst polluting corporations. And through his power, through an abuse of his position, he basically was allowing these corporations to dump in one of the worst places you can dump, which is, of course, a water reclamation area. It's probably part of the Bureau of Land Management, if I'm not mistaken. And he is actually using his authority to do so. And then when he gets caught, which I think logically they're probably bound to eventually get caught, and it might have been a predetermined knowledge that yes, someone's eventually going to complain about this. Hopefully it's not someone like Bob Burton that's actually going to go through with the research and everything and pay out of his own pocket to actually do the research and prosecute these guys. But then they have the gall to say, okay, well, we're the Environmental Protection Agency. We're going to spend taxpayer money to clean up the mess. So you have corporations actually polluting through government, illegally, and then government saying, oh, well, we got caught. Let's use taxpayer money to clean it up. Am I about right here, Bert? Bob?
That's absolutely correct.
Wow.
Transfield Services International, Atkins Global, AMAC, and if you look up these corporations, you will find that they have been convicted of bribery and all kinds of different felonious criminal actions in multiple countries around the world and even in several states in the United States. Yet our legislators continue to be their agents. And in the case of National Association of Manufacturers and Associated Industries, they are unregistered agents. These organizations are foreign corporations or foreign principals, as the law reads. In order to represent them in our government, you have to be registered as a foreign agent according to the Foreign Agent Registry Act. Associated Industries of Florida nor National Association of Manufacturers have any registered foreign agents, yet they're representing Siemens, Nestle, Klausner, all these multinational and foreign corporations. These guys are controlling, they're financing the majority of our funding that goes into our electoral process. The money that comes into our electoral process is coming from overseas, from people who don't care about America or our liberty or our land or our property rights or our gun rights or anything else.
Well, and it's true that, but it's also a lot of that money is money being funneled by our own politicians offshore and then reintroduced it as campaign funding. That's the frightening part.
Well, that's true. They are equally, these guys are prostitutes. They're literally as low as they get. It just absolutely is disgusting. They get out there and tell us they're good guys and they're family men and they're Christians and they're all these wonderful things. And they turn around and do the most horrific, un-American, anti-humanity, just everything against man. To me, the creation of God is man. The creation of man is the corporation or whatever. These guys, for the corporation, do things in the face of what is good for mankind.
Well,
and then they go around and claim to be...
ironic. Sorry, it's ironic because, the whole purpose of a corporation in the first place was a privilege. It was an honor bestowed on all people to a group of people that wanted to start something that would benefit all people. And that has been so twisted and tainted in this world. And especially when you're talking about an international corporation coming in, that has no authority or principle from the public whatsoever. It's international. It's nothing to do with the permission of the people. And this is, you're right. This is anti-nature, anti-God, anti-man, anti-everything. It's horrific.
Well, and I'm not an exceptionally religious person or anything. That's the values I grew up with and the values that I try to live by. And I see these people selling themselves out to these what I call legal fictions. A corporation doesn't exist in reality. It's this creation of man.
Sure.
I see these people doing awful things so that these corporations benefit. And I look around me, and one of the reasons I fight for what I do is I see just decent, everyday, hard-working people being absolutely mutilated, devastated, and just everything they've worked for in their life, their pursuit of happiness, everything that, decent people would want them to have, taken away and exploited. And these guys are doing it for temporary profits. They're sociopaths. They have no concern for the damage they're causing. For one thing, Kathy and me. Kathy is stage 4 cancer, terminally ill, been given a bad prognosis. And these guys obviously take the opportunity to attack us. Right now, as we speak, they're trying to drag me before an ethics commission. This ridiculous stuff. The whole thing being Bob's wife, Kathy is in bad health. Let's hit him while he's having a hard time. And they're making it very obvious that that's what they're doing.
Let's go over this. I mean, you decided that the only way that you were going to be able to get this public, because you don't belong to any of these lobbying groups, you don't have access to news, you don't have access to propaganda, you decide the only way you can really get this out in the open is to actually publicly challenge the state senator for his office. So tell us about that.
Well, in the deposition, we finally, with Ryan Tyson, the guy I recorded with his permission, we finally came to the point where I couldn't be a fool and try the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Mm-hmm. And I told Ryan Tyson, I said, fine, you keep telling me the senator's going to do this, the senator's going to do that, but he never comes through, so I'm going to run for Senate. And I'm the kind of guy who follows up, and I will do what I say I'm going to do. Well, this is where they started to call Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and this is a recorded call directly from Senator Charlie Dean directly to Deputy Director Bailey, that Senator Dean gets in an interview with a newspaper reporter and describes his phone conversation in detail. Well, he calls up the Deputy Director of Florida Department of Law Enforcement and orders a raid on my home. And they come in and they took our YouTubes down that we had put up. They took all our equipment. But now, that recording that I'm asking for of that phone call between those two gentlemen is missing.
Mm.
So, with all these things going on, the interference with the electoral, our electoral process, Now these guys are trying to drag me before an ethics commission for electoral violations, like I'm the bad guy. It's endless abuse of state systems to counterattack or to attack adversaries.
Sure, you threatened literally that you were going to run for senator, which is a humorous way of saying that you threatened somebody. But you said, did you also say that they redistricted you or your particular area so that you were no longer in Senator Dean's?
Yeah, and we're on the Swanee River, and right now where I'm sitting, I can see Senator Charlie Dean's district. It's across the river. I could throw a rock and hit it. They districted me out of Charlie Dean's district so that I couldn't run against him because they were afraid of what I would bring to a bully pulpit.
And when did that happen exactly?
That happened days after I signed up to run for office.
Oh, Bob. Without men like you, sir, the world would literally be a worse place. So I commend you for this. Stay with us. We're going to have Bob for another hour and continue along this horrible timeline, exposing Florida, the state of Florida and the districts for what they are, which is just complete organized crime to the T. Unfortunately, this is all over the place. We'll be back. Stay with us.
Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes. Men who despise you, enslave you, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel. Who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are men. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful. Let us use that power to make this life a wonderful adventure. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world to do away with greed. A world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Do not despair. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power they took from the people will return to the people. Let us all unite.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Corporation Nation Radio. I'm your host, Clint Richardson, and with me today is Mr. Robert Bob Burton from the area, the country known as Florida that has been usurped by the United States. And if I'm not mistaken, Bob, it sounds like you're one of those crazy conspiracy guys who thinks that what's happening to them is not just a national or state plan, but a global plan for the 21st century, an agenda, in fact, for the 21st century. Do you think that this would be qualified as an Agenda 21, all of this that you've told us today?
It's what I would call Agenda 21. What I call Agenda 21 is a little different from the mainstream alternative. Most people think of Agenda 21 as a United Nations program, and what I find it as is a United Nations Global Compact program, which, of course, the Global Compact is a group of multinational corporations.
Sure.
Who, of course, are there to help us with cultural heritage and environmental concerns, and it's all for us. And at the other hand, when on the other end of it is your corporation nation, the capper, the investment funds. To me, it's the cycle that you see actually in the swastika. I explain it to people all the time, saying, why do you think the rays on the swastika are bent over? It keeps coming back in. The thing feeds itself. Everything turns back toward the center. But the thing is beatable. It seems like this really huge thing that's run by people who we call elite. what you find once you get far enough into it, that the people are really stupid, especially at this point where it's generation after generation. And these guys, they're not the guys who mastermind all this stuff. They're inept kids. They're literally born on third base, thought they hit a home run. They are takedownable. I really, for the first time in a long time, believe we are taking them down in Florida. And I hope that they will do it, what we're doing here, all over the country. These guys are going down. If you look at the 2010 statewide grand jury report, they single out some of our state agencies for exactly what we're talking about. The statewide grand jury here is begging to meet with the people of the state of Florida to find out what they know. And they want to take action, and they want to force our legislature to straighten up their act. And, of course, it's going to take a full enema.
Well, yeah. See, that's the problem is that it takes people to actually get off of their collective butts and do something about this. That is our greatest disadvantage, is that the society has been built up to either promote sloth or to promote someone having 3 or 4 jobs with no time to do anything about this. And yet there could be such a happy middle ground there if people would just start paying attention to this stuff. These guys only have power because of this thing that we like to call, manufactured consent, tacit consent, unwritten consent. And that consent is simply the inaction and silence of the people as these guys literally poison the water supply through the reclamation. I mean, it's ridiculous. And when you're talking about the grand jury, you're talking about the people's grand jury. You're talking about actual people doing something about this. So that's at least some good news that someone's actually doing something.
Well, and it's in the official forum. These guys in 2010 they just railed against the state agencies and how corrupt they were. And they specifically talked about the commercial aspects of it, where state systems would be used to line the pockets of so-called private interest, but what it would be corporate interest. They didn't go as far as to say that these corporate interests were multinational. But on the other hand, the scope of the material they were allowed to investigate was limited. It was somebody stifled the material they could get in front of them. And they had to, because they saw that this particular statewide grand jury was not going the way they wanted things to go.
Of course.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tom Feeney, Yang Enterprises, Clint Curtis, who he was the guy with Murder, Spies, and Voting Lies. All that happened here in Florida, where Tom Feeney, high up in the Republican Party, had gone to Yang Enterprises to have Diabol vote-flipping software written. It all has to do with these same guys in Florida, and enough people have been on them for enough years that they're in checkmate right now. But they're tied to the guys that are in your state and in California and Indiana and New York. If we can just start the fire going to get them all prosecuted and all just put away.
Well, that's the question. How do we literally light a fire under people's rear ends here? How do we get this started? Because we talk about it a lot, and people like you actually go out there and risk their own livelihood and their own pocketbooks to do something about it. But how do we get? I mean, this is the ultimate question, I think, that goes unanswered. I know, we have a large community of people who gather in the digital realm here, in the virtual realm, and talk, and listen. A lot of information is exposed, and unfortunately, from my disposition, if I was looking at this as an impartial advisor, an impartial. Whatever the word is, I would say, look, what's happening here is a lot of information is coming out in the so-called alternative media, not in order to change what's happening, but to give informed knowledge, almost informed consent of what is happening. In other words, it's all being put out there for us by the likes of the shock jocks and by the likes of the people, your Glenn Becks and your Sean Hannitys, who are pretending to be the alternative media, who are pretending to be us. It's all getting out there. It's all good, but they're not doing anything about it. And that's because they know that people, aside from people like you, will not get up and do anything. People don't want to talk about politics. People don't want to talk about anything. They just want to be left alone. And I'm sorry, but there, nowhere in history, no clan, no community, no tribe has ever been able to just sit back and not do anything, lest that tribe, clan, city, nation be taken over from not only outside, but the inside. And that's what we're talking about here. And when you say, light a fire, how the heck do we do that besides what we're doing right now?
Well, and I don't know that you can actually ever get the mass of people to react the way you want them to. My theory is that you take the little handful of us that are willing to get up there and do it and just stand by them and just do it.
And that seems to be how it's always been in history, that there's always the few protecting the many. Is that about right?
It sure is. It's a lot of work, and sometimes you wonder if it's worth it.
Yeah. All right, Bob, stay with us. You're on the Corporation Nation here on Republic Broadcasting Network. We'll be right back.
Is this real? Versus just rhyme? The world is like a ride. You think it's real? Just a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. The world is like a ride. You think it's real? Just a rhyme. We can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice between fear and love. Life goes up and down, round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored. Up and down, round and round, and it's very loud.
All right, folks, welcome back.
Don't worry, don't be afraid.
Clint Richardson here on the Corporation Nation, and we're talking with Bob Burton. Bob, do you have some contact info? I know you don't really have any websites anymore, and I know that your computers were taken away from you because you threatened to run for state senator. But do you have an email or contact info that if people are interested in maybe rallying together and actually helping you or supporting you in any way?
Yes, my email is rburtonvs@gmail.com. And I'm very interested in anyone who is interested in doing the heavy lifting more than being frantic on Facebook and that kind of thing, is actually interested in getting involved and doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah, what was the email again? It was BF or VF?
V as in Victor. R as in Robert, Burton, Burton, V as in Victor, S as in Scott, at gmail.com. That's rburtonvs@gmail.com.
All right. Well, I wrote a couple articles on my blog about what I call the Great Disclosure, and I'm curious about your opinion on this. And I call it basically informed consent, massive informed consent, and I call it the Great Disclosure. It's basically the revelation of organized crime at the highest levels. It's like revealing this national, international thing that we call Agenda 21. It's revealing the secret societies. It's revealing the origins of law. It's revealing everything, and it's happening in all spectrums. And I include the alternative media in that. And a great part of that, I believe, is whether it started that way or just became that way, has been very co-opted by these people. And what we have is, again, it's a great disclosure. And as long as you don't say, hey, wait, stop, wait a minute, I don't consent to that. Wait, what are you talking about? Private prisons? Wait, what are you talking about? Lobbyists as politicians? Wait, what are you talking about? international compacts with the United Nations or through the United Nations, we being one of those nations. We are a state of the United Nations. Wait a minute. How can we be a state if we're a nation? Wait. It's like this great disclosure of information, not because people want to change it. You don't hear solutions being thrown out there. And of course, the legal definition of the word solution is nothing but end of contract or satisfaction of contract, which would mean you'd have to get yourself out of this system so that it doesn't affect you anymore. But you don't hear solutions. You don't hear people fighting it. You only hear disclosure. And that is very disturbing to me. What do you think?
You know, it's disturbing that dissidence has been taken over by professional COINTEL prototypes.
Well, what they've done is they've created a term called civility, and if you look up that word and you see how they are actually regulating civility, they're forcing people to be civil. They're forcing you to accept every condition, every race, every criminal element, and you're supposed to be civil about it. No, we're supposed to be nonviolent. You're supposed to fight it through the system that is completely corrupt and that you'll never win. But you have to be civil. And they're actually passing laws in Utah and elsewhere that civility is a requirement of people. It's regulated by force. You have to be civil in the public forum. And that is just crap, because that's not what this country was founded on, certainly.
Well, and, I am very civil. Of course, it may be considered as some to be passive-aggressive. But I generally, in the public forum, when I get out and just with my buddies and everything, and they would think, this guy could never be civil. But when I do get into the official forum or into a courtroom, I am very civil. But I always do it in a way that brings the ire of the enemy, because they're the ones who have something to hide. We have nothing to hide. It's easy to get them to just blow their cool and lose their composure. And it's very easy for us to do the same thing. But if we realize that we are the ones in control, they only can do what they do to us with our consent. And of course, some of us are stuck along with the consent of the masses just because I don't see those of us who fight as the unusual dissidents. I see that what's happening to us is we are the good people who think critically, and the people who go, no, you shall not. But we're trapped in with the herd, the ones who allow their consent to be manufactured. Those few of us out here going, no, I won't go along with that, get drawn into that herd. But at the same time, the guys who are getting the consent and the guys who are deceiving all of us are just a little handful of people. Well, there's a handful of us out here also who are also not going to go along with that. We're smarter, we're more capable, and if we would just stand up, I believe we'd be bolder, and I think these guys are in checkmate right now, and I think that they are the grandsons of the greats that actually did this, the masterminds. I don't think they know how to handle it. I think they're nervous, insecure, uneasy. I say if there was ever a time in all of humanity to take them out, it's right now, without violence. Just absolutely holler boo and chase them back to where they came from.
So you're talking about an inherited tyranny. You're talking about inherited privilege. Maybe one of the worst mistakes that these people did was to open up the college system to us common folk out here, and use it to actually make our education experience a bad one, because that limits their the privateness of their schools, which originally these universities were nothing more than to train the clergy being the legal aspect of the law. When you're talking about your Dukes and your Harvards and all those were all divinity schools, divinity being the way to rule people. So when they opened that, when they stopped all these secretive societies, not that they stopped them, but they made it I don't know. I guess maybe they made it more hidden. I don't know. It's hard to figure out.
In plain sight.
Yeah. That's the point. It's disclosure. It's all of it's in plain sight now. We all know it's there. We all know something is very, very, very wrong. But we seem to have, and I think I understand what the problem is, really. When it boils down to is that often we have a legislative amongst us, not government, but we have a legislative body in the form of an organization or a group that we start. And sometimes we even have a head of that. But what we don't have is, or a judicial, but what we don't have is the executive branch of all of these groups. We have a bunch of groups out there whining and crying, and some of them are even very effective in what they do. But I'll tell you what we don't have. We don't have a militia. We don't have an army. We don't have what's called the executive force of government. Of course, everything Congress and the judicial does is solely based on the fact that they can enforce it through their executive branch, be that the sheriff of the county or be that the president of the United States as commander-in-chief. That is what we have let go. We have lost our ability to enforce our will. And that, unfortunately, is the topic of the day. And it's, it can get you arrested for even talking about it. Oh, my gosh. Stay with us, Bob. And, folks, we'll be right back after these messages.
Living in the street. Oh, there's a solution.
Derivatives, quantitative easing, trade imbalances, recession, low GDP, nations close to collapsing, and subprime loans, foreclosed homes, and people's taxes spent to bail out too big to fail AAA banks again. Fear levels rising as the US crash seems imminent, having smashed the debt ceiling of 14 trillion. Despite protests and clashes in Athens streets, the IMF imposed structurally unjust programs in Greece. In fact, the term economy entered our language from the
Corporation Nation radio program. I'm Clint Richardson. With me is Bob Burton. Bob, did you have anything else pertinent to get on? I thought we'd take some phone calls. Someone wants to call in. The phone number is 800-313-9443, 313-9443 to talk with Bob or ask a question, or heck, to even say, hey, Bob, how can I help you? I'm here in Florida. Bob, I know that your story is much longer than what we've had time for, but is there anything else you want to get up?
It's kind of hard to get on a radio show without being able to look at documentation and things like that. But if there is anybody in Florida, I really would like for us to get together and finish what we've started. We are doing things not by shaking paper signs and not by writing letters to our governor or our senator, but we are actually getting involved in the official forum, in the courtrooms, and we're actually making things happen. And I hope there's more people out there that will actually not learn from us, but just figure it out and do what we're doing. Actually,
what about someone in another state that perhaps doesn't know how to go about this? Do you have maybe you should, it sounds like you should start a website and have your documents and your process that you've done in a place where people can copy what you've done. I mean, that would be the next logical step for you.
Well, and when done is a relative term. We're still we have a few heads on the wall, but we still got a long way to go. And it's a learning process. Nobody ever wrote a book on how to do this. Sure. My wife and I are carpenters. I started out with an international machine company, and she was my banker. But now we're simple carpenters. We're out here doing what we're doing. We're learning as we go, but we are having successes. And believe it or not, when we get raided and we get all our stuff confiscated and that type thing, we actually consider that a success because we do realize we're standing out from the crowd. But there are risks. And I hope that others will stand up and just do not necessarily what we're doing, but things that put these guys in check, things that put these guys in checkmate.
That expose them.
Well, expose them
or something. What's your next play? What's your next move? Or do you even want to talk about it?
Well, we're going to Tallahassee we're putting together actually a YouTube just so we have a little bit of advertising or a trailer as to what we're going to do. We're going to Tallahassee then to address Governor Scott with the documentation we have. We have him in checkmate. Governor Scott is a former CEO of Associated Industries of Florida.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, yeah. So, as such, he is a unregistered foreign agent. And, of course, Kathy, when we got into the cancer thing with Kathy, it was like, Kathy puts it like stepping off a curb in front of a bus.
Sure.
We were fighting along really well. We never would have realized getting into the cancer industry that we would run across the exact same thing with the exact same power structures. So what we're looking for is something other than the orthodox corporate cancer treatments. We're looking for something different. We're going to go and try to force Governor Scott to write her a good faith down payment on the money he owes her for what they've done with her raid and that kind of thing. Just enough that she can afford possibly to take her fight against cancer into her own hands. And really, that's kind of where we are. But at the same time, we've actually stepped into a whole new world. I mean, we had no idea that the exact same corporations and group of corporations that we were against, just in the environmental, land use, small business, that type of industry, they also have their hand in cancer and health care.
Absolutely. You put on the dark glasses, and now you know that they live. Hey, let's take Fred in California. Hi, Fred.
Hi, Clint. Thanks for taking my call. And
Sure.
I'm disabled and I've been in a lot of pain since '87 and been bedridden since 2000. And I was reading novels to get away from my pain, and then when the towers dropped, I switched to history. And little did I know where it would take me. It finally got me to RBN. I'm still in a lot of pain, but I was even going to see if I could get on a talk show and be a talk show host, because items were not being discussed, but that I was, reading and finding out, until I found RBN, and your show is so spot on, man. I can't believe it. You're a great addition to RBN. But, being an activist that I've been on talk shows, especially with Wi-Fi, I've been around the world, and that's what I am. I'm a bed activist. And I've always thought, what is the next stage for talk shows? What's the next generation? And we've got to go from a reactive mode, which I've noticed that most talk shows are reactive. We talk about what has happened. And I fully feel your emotion and an expression of, trying to get onto solutions. And talk shows have a tremendous opportunity
potential
to be proactive. And for instance, get a vote thing going where you have an agenda for every week or any time period, and then you have people vote and send those votes up to Capitol Hill. But it has to come from talk shows. And RBN is a good example. I mean, your show is RBN Network is great, and I've had 12 years to vet out hundreds of them, and but I would say that the next stage, if we're looking for solutions, and I know it's frustrating because it's easy to talk about the problems, but to actually put it into a change paradigm, we need something that can bring us together, and we already have the construction of that right now. That's RBN.
I'm going to have to agree with you. I mean, let that be a challenge to both the owners and the hosts of RBN to start being more active, as I say, in the real world, and not just in this virtual realm that we feel so comfortable in. I mean, I completely concur with you, sir. What do you think there, Bob?
That's exactly, I dump people's case all the time for the exact same thing. We can't, we ridicule our children for walking around with their face in a smartphone, yet we come and sit in front of a computer all day long, play on Facebook. We absolutely have to get into our county commission meetings, our legislative hearings, our water management meetings. Every one of those meetings we need to go to and not only sit there as observers, but actually go toe-to-toe with the lobbyists of these foreign corporations.
And expose them for what they are, because a lot of people don't realize that these people are lobbyists. They have tricks in their bag that can make you believe that they are the grandmother from next door, and they will play that card till the very end, and it's very pathetic. James, or excuse me, Fred, did you have anything else you wanted to ask or say?
Yes. I feel your frustration too, because I read a lot and I listen to a lot of talk shows, different talk shows, and my frustration is the same as yours. You know, we can talk about this thing and discuss it in many different ways, but to put it into action is very tough because you have to organize people. That's a challenge. And if we use talk shows, I mean, it's going to take some marketing, it's going to take some money, but if we could come up with a voting package so that we have the RBN Speaks, you know, RBN Speaks, and it consists of people who can vote on different subject matters that are discussed during the course of a week or whatever time period. And then that gets taken up to the Hill, and we can vote as a voting group and let it grow.
Well,
like I say,
I agree. And thanks for the call, James. We're going to go to a commercial here pretty quick. But, you've got the perfect name, too. You've got Republic. I mean, that's really what we're shooting for when it comes to...
The Republic Speaks. And
yeah, well, each republic, not just one, but each individual one, you know, as an organized group other than this central government. That's actually not a bad idea, sir.
Okay, well, Clint, look, you've got a great show, and you people out there, donate, because this is a well-worth cause. Clint, you're bringing a lot of good material. You got my antennas up, especially your interview with Jenna Spagnolia. I got sent in for her book, but... we need some ideas. I think that's one that, you know, after 15, 20 years of talking in the talk shows, and you know, this is going to be great. Yeah. Anyway, if I can help out, just let me know.
All right. Well, I'll have Bob give his email again, and you know, always support the station.
Oh, you betcha.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we're going to go to break. We'll be back in our final segment with James in California. Okay, folks, welcome back. Oh, the time goes so quick, and there is so much tyranny to expose. It's just so difficult. Bob, why don't you give out your email again for people who want to connect with you there in Florida, and for anyone who wants to follow in your footsteps, really.
Oh, I don't know about my footsteps. That'd be a tough road to hoe. But hopefully things are getting easier and these guys are becoming more gun-shy. I think that's not true. They certainly don't hesitate to raid other people. They actually took out a Sheriff Nick Finch here in Liberty County. He just a couple of days ago was found not guilty of all charges and reinstated. But we do need to stand up, and anybody who wants to work with what we are doing, we're more than happy to share whatever we have. My email is rburtonvs@gmail.com. That's R as in Robert, Burton, Burton, V as in Victor, S as in Scott, @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from anybody who wants to use our material, wants to participate in the database we're building. We're doing a geographic location of corrupt individuals on a map of the United States. Anyone who wants to contribute to that or take what we have, we'd be more than happy to trade material, give material, accept material, however they want to do it.
Are you doing anything with ICLEI?
Not really. Harvey Rubin, individually, personally, we are at odds with. Of course, now he has oversight over all 67 county court clerks in the state of Florida. But ICLEI, we find as they're important. They're no less important than the other non-government organization, but they're one of several thousand that we're up against. So we don't really single them out as any more significant than any other.
Just all with the same goal of implementing all the policies and model legislations and best practices of Agenda 21 and beyond, basically.
Right along with Atkins Global, who is based out of London, England, was here in Florida doing the environmental permitting summer school. So, I mean, here these guys are foreign corporations that are involved in working hand in hand with our state agencies for permitting processes against residents, small business owners, and landowners of Florida, yet they're lobbying at the same time for free market enterprise for themselves. So I can name thousands of non-government organizations and private corporations that would be doing exactly what ICLEI is doing.
Right. It's basically
for itself somehow.
It's the following the same public-private partnership model. Basically, it doesn't matter what the name of the group is because they're all one group with many different names.
ICLEI, I believe, was singled out as a scapegoat. They were new compared to Rotary International, Chamber of Commerce, those type of organizations that have Associated Industries, National Association of Manufacturers, the organizations that have been around since 1915, 1920. ICLEI, I believe, was actually created as a scapegoat to take the heat.
That would make perfect sense.
Big yeah, exactly. It'd be modus operandi just right down the center for these guys.
That's a thought I had not considered, and now that I think about it, and I think about the exposure it actually gets, I think you're probably 100% on that one. Hey, let's take a call from James in Pennsylvania.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Howdy.
Yeah, this is a fascinating conversation. We had touched on this the spectrum of idolatrous syndicalism and the corporate fascist takeover that's been occurring between these little cliques of people. I was involved recently in establishing a common law de jure grand jury in my state, and we felt all kinds of opposition from many people, various organizations. The sheriff is definitely not on board. He's a total corporatist. He's taken all the federal money, and he doesn't represent anybody in my county. And we had other opposition from people. I was part of the group known as the Republic for the United States of America, and it fell in amongst bad vibes, and people have just sabotaged everything, to break it down. I mean, we actually seated a common law grand jury in my county, and it, but we had so much opposition and various individuals employing the Delphi technique, which is all about corporate syndicalism. And and this is what this thing is here.
That's the big difference, right, between us and them, is that they don't let us infiltrate them. Only they can be part of their little groups. We can never get in there to infiltrate and break them up. Whereas anything we start, myself included, I tried to start a We Are Change here in Utah just because there's nothing here. And, of course, it got co-opted and broken down, and we all started infighting, and I saw what was happening. Same thing that happened in Los Angeles and everywhere else. That's the big difference, is that they take essentially blood oaths. We do not. They threaten death. We do not. We are civil. We say, "Oh, yeah, you're a jerk, but you can stay in the group." Yeah,
we
you can break us up.
We are the righteous. We are the right thinkers, the correct thinkers. Okay, and they don't have any respect for us, for those that think correctly. And it's like they just I don't know that it's well. You must understand, as I do, that there are 4 hidden dynasties on this planet that are run by a bunch of Luciferians. Those 4 hidden dynasties being politics, commerce, education, and religion. They're all tied in as one, working in syndication to do the will of their master, which is Satan the devil. Okay? And this is what we're up against. We're against these idolatrous Satanists who are just, bent on idolatry. They worship money. They covet money. And this is what it's all about. It's all about, these little cliques to feather their nest.
It's basically what we've been trained to worship. We've all been trained to be, as you say, idolatrous and even syndicalists ourselves. We've been trained to worship symbols over the real thing. Everything we do now is the symbol of the real thing. Everything. And that's, unfortunately...
Those symbols are not truth.
Right. That's right. There's a great book that I recommend. It's hard to read, but it's what the Matrix movie was mostly based on. It's called Simulacra and Simulation. I can't remember the author. It's probably not carried anymore in many bookstores, but it's a fascinating read. Fascinating.
They live in it.
Yeah, and that's a great one too, of course. Well, thank you for the call there, sir. And Bob.
And I love the reference to Delphi technique.
Yes. I'm sure you're accustomed to that, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I love it, actually. I love to use it. I love to counter-use it against them when they go to using it. And it's just, to me, it's just become fun.
Yeah. Well, how do you do that?
The guys who they have administer the Delphi technique are usually greenhorn, don't understand what they're doing, and they're told A, B, C, D how to use the Delphi technique. Mm-hmm. But if you psychologically and mentality-wise understand the Delphi technique and understand the lower elements of human behavior that they're using and come from a dysfunctional family like I do, then you know how to counterattack them and make their own little efforts work against them with passive-aggressive behavior.
Plus, with a little reason and logic, you can say that there is no consensus. Obviously, there's no consensus if someone disagrees. Well, Bob, thank you for joining me today. We're about to hear the final music. And listen, folks, for anyone out there, my heart goes out to your wife and you with this cancer thing. If anyone out there has any recommendations for Bob and his wife as far as a treatment for cancer that is in the alternative realm, in other words, the realm that actually treats cancer and cures it. Oh, I said the illegal word cure. Please also contact Bob. Get out your real quick.
It's rburtonvs@gmail.com.
All right, folks, take care, and thanks again, Bob, and all the best to you, and good luck.
Thank you, Clint.